Throughout Philippine history, craftsmanship in its different forms have always been prevalent. The Filipinos have an innate inclination to create, exemplifying the state of being engaged in their craft and taking a sense of joy and pride in their work. The Filipino craftsman dedicates himself to his art and to telling the story of the Philippines, bearing its truest essence, its soul for the world to see. Blessed with natural resources, Filipino craftsmen are able to come up with a magnificent product that tells a million story not just about their lives, but the culture of their place. Clearly, this reflects Filipino crafts that magnify labors of love and patience. These are evident in the products of their skillful hands and imaginative minds. Creative crafts in the Philippines do not only satisfy our senses, but each artwork speaks of the passion and active involvement of the artist in visualizing, connecting, and appreciating the culture and the creative manipulation of the objects around. Do you have what it takes to become a craftsman? In this subject, you will learn the brief overview of Philippine arts and crafts and its significance. It is then expected that you will be able to find yourself become an agent of this culture-filled journey. As you will come to know more of these arts and crafts, be prepared to become your most creative self, for you will be creating your own handicraft. This journey transcends beyond knowing history or applying discussed topics. Rather, it is an awakening of your soul in taking responsibility to promote, conserve, and develop our indigenous crafts. So are you ready to take these responsibilities? Throughout Philippine history, let us first define what is craft or crafts. From the Old English word craft, it means power, strength, or might. Later on, it came to mean skill or art and was associated with an idea of mental power. So eventually, it was linked to the things that made by hand, and everything that is made by hand, of course, needs might, needs strength, and needs skill or art. So that is where the term craft came from. So other connotation of the word are decorative arts or handmade goods for use and display. And it can also be defined as trade and folkways and long traditions of pre-industrial production of handmade objects. So everything that is made by hand or everything that is made from a person's skill or art with their strength or might or power is considered to be a craft. We have another definition here that is from the Unesco, or the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. They define craft as follows: those produced by artisans either completely by hand or with the help of hand tools or even mechanical means, as long as the direct manual contribution of the artisan remains the most substantial component of the finished product. So, it is anything that is produced by an artisan. If fine arts or arts have artists, for craft making or craft, we call them artisans. So, produced by artisans either by hand or by using tools or by using machines. So long as the main contribution or the main facet of the product is directly contributed by the person or by the artisan. So these are produced without restriction in the terms of quantity and using raw materials from sustainable resources. Another thing that makes craft distinct is that it can be produced with no restriction when it comes to its number. It can be produced individually, it can be mass produced, and of course the use of raw materials or indigenous materials or sustainable materials. When we say indigenous or sustainable, it is These are materials that can be found locally in a certain or specific place, and at the same time, it can be renewed, can be sustained. So example of raw materials or indigenous materials in our place are bamboos, rattan, or anything that can be grown or that can be renewed. The special nature of artisanal products derives from their distinctive features, which can be utilitarian, aesthetic, artistic, creative, culturally attached, decorative, functional, traditional, religiously and socially symbolic, and significant. So these are the special features or nature of crafts or anything that is produced by an artisan, artisanal products. And yes, that is how the craft was defined or is defined by the UNESCO. So let us talk about the history of craft education in the Philippines. So during the establishment of education system brought by the Americans, craft subjects are actually offered, no, such as woodwork or clay modeling. So before, actually, the history of craft making in the Philippines, or origins way back before we are colonized by the Spaniards. So we have pre-Hispanic history of craft making, but the establishment of a formal education about crafting or craft education starts when the American colonizer brought us formal or the education system. So the Philippine art scenes echoes the same preference for painting and sculpture works, and also draws a broad distinction between crafts and fine arts. Actually, if you could observe, even in our present time, craft making does not have recognition, unlike arts, no. So in universities or schools, we have degrees in arts, fine arts, while we rarely hear of degrees in craft making or craft education. So actually, craft become demarginalized and could rightly find a place in the mainstream art society and education in the Philippines. So it does not have attention, or it is not recognized as much as art is being recognized in the Philippine education system. So let us discuss the three periods of craft education, history of craft education in the Philippines. First, we have pre-Hispanic. When we say pre-Hispanic, before the Spaniards colonized our country. So the history of craft education in the Philippines parallels the rise and fall of an empire. It started small, with scattered and informal teaching and learning of crafts during this stage, during the pre-Hispanic periods, no. Teaching of craft making is very informal. This where crafts production catered only to the needs of a chief, a social elite, or the general population of consumers. So during the pre-Hispanic period, crafts production is done only for the social elite, or for those in higher status in the society. Then during the Spanish regime in the Spanish colonial Philippines, convents were turned into schools and workshops of craft making. So yung mga convent during the Spanish regime, ginawa nila itong schools for and workshop or training place for craft learning, where they learn carpentry, ironworks, drawing, painting of images, cutting and sewing of altar clothes, designing and sewing of altar pieces, textile weaving, and other forms of practical arts. So such schools, serving as handmaidens of missionary work, came to an end when the Academia de las Bellas opened in 1785. So at that time, painting and drawing then came to be regarded for its purely academic worth. Then during the American period, crafts education in the Philippines have reached its peak during this time when the educational system was revised and expanded to include industrial work and crafts for livelihood like woodwork, clay modeling, basket and mat weaving, and embroidery and lace making. So it is during the American period where the educational system in the Philippines was established, and they have included craft making, industrial works and craft making as form of livelihood. Now let us discuss the craft studies that exist in other Asian countries. So craft studies in Asian education systems. Interestingly, the marginalization of crafts does not appear to be a universal phenomenon. In some regions of East and Southeast Asia, crafts institutes and colleges are well attended. So let us first discuss the craft education in Korea. So craft education in Korean universities, for instance, falls under the art department, which run three main programs. The fine art program, which offers painting and sculpture. The craft program, which features work on metals, ceramics, wood, fiber, and glass. And lastly, they have the design program, which offers industrial design, graphic design, and fashion design. So until the 1970s, craft and design were classified as applied arts in Korea. According to a 2004 report, the state of craft education in Korea is well attested by impressive figures. So they have universities with craft majors. They have 58 universities with craft majors. And within that 58 university, we have 2,042 students majoring in various fields of crafts like ceramics, metal and jewelry, or woodworking, fiber and glasswork. The highest number of enrollees is in the field of ceramics, which also happens to be one of the oldest craft practices in the country, in Korea. The regions of Seoul and Gyeongsang-do are the biggest sites of universities and therefore of crafts colleges. So within the college curriculum of craft education in Korea, craft majors have to complete 130 units of humanities and take up subjects such as drawing, modeling, and computer-aided design. So the humanities subjects take up the first and second years of the curriculum, while the major classes take up the third and fourth years. So with regards to their thesis naman, students create work for a bachelor degree show. So it is some kind of exhibit by the end of their education or their degree. So they have to come up or to show, to have an exhibit or a bachelor degree show. So crafts graduates in Korea have a wide array of career opportunities kasi they may pursue an independent craft practice, or they can work in a team as a studio artist, or they can work in a company or industry, or have a job in education sector. They can also work in a craft distribution firm or form part of a craft research organization or agency like a museum or a restoration company. So a Korean professor, Professor John, notes that a majority of craft practitioners in their country, which he calls craft artists, are highly educated. So they create and exhibit works in shows that can be considered or can be leveled to an international standards. So in Korea, another highlight in Koreans craft studies is that The high school curriculum that they have prepared, or the Korea Institute of Curriculum and Evaluation, has a goal or objective to enable students to attain knowledge and skills in diverse fields so that they will be able to carve out a career in accordance with their aptitudes and interests, and to encourage their students to work to develop their tradition and culture in a way appropriate for the global setting. So such skills include craft making, so like ceramics and textiles that are offered under industry subject in their curriculum. There are also specialized high schools devoted to the arts, which most likely include crafts. Considering that Korean universities are known to group crafts courses with fine arts programs under the same faculty of arts. So they value craft degree or craft education in Korea because they include it in their curriculums, even in their high school curriculum. Now let us move on to the next country. We have Japan. The craft education in Japan. So Japan's integration of crafts into university education varies little from that of Korea. So crafts courses are offered in arts and design universities under the Faculty of Arts Department of Crafts. The courses take 4 years to complete with specialization in the following fields. They have ceramics, metalwork, textile, glass, lacquer, dyeing, and embroidery. Unlike Korean crafts programs, crafts department in Japan do not offer woodworking. So the most common craft specialization is in ceramics, whose practice dates back to the ancient period of Japan. Thus followed by metalwork and textile, then glass, weaving, dyeing, and finally embroidery. So in Japan, craft specialization programs are offered not only at the undergraduate level, but they also have craft degrees or craft programs at the MA and PhD level. So my master's degree and doctoral or doctorate degree ang craft education or crafts courses sa Japan. So students are expected to blend traditional techniques with contemporary aesthetics. Their work must also be informed by a sense of functional beauty, which they call this as, they termed it as beauty of utility. Next, we have another countries rather. We have craft education in Indonesia and Malaysia. So in Southeast Asia, craft education has also established itself in formal learning centers. So same with Korea and Japan, they also cater or they also have formal education for craft making. So in keris making, keris is a traditional craft of Southeast Asian people or the Malaysian specifically, is offered as a course in the Fine Arts Department of the Indonesia, not Malaysia. Department of Indonesia College of the Arts in Surakarta. In Malaysia, the state-run Malaysian Handicraft Development Corporation operates the National Craft Institute, which this corporation or this institution provides academic and skills training in various fields of Malaysian crafts like batik weaving, ceramic, woodcraft, bamboo, and metal-based craft. So, the Institute offers diploma and certificate programs in these two countries, both in Indonesia and Malaysia. Diploma programs that runs for a total of 3 years, while a certificate programs that can be completed in 2 years. A 2004 report on the state of Malaysian crafts noted a total of 436 institute students that have completed or graduated in the two programs, the diploma program and certificate program. Then, lastly, we have Thailand. Craft education in Thailand. Thailand incorporates craft studies in their secondary education curriculum. So, it consists of academic stream and vocational stream. So, in Thailand, craft studies or craft education is part of their secondary education curriculum, or ang katumbas niyan is senior high sa atin. Kasi they have two program for craft studies. They have academic stream and vocational stream. So in the vocational stream, craft education occurs alongside other strand or other specialties like Thai and foreign languages, science, mathematics, social studies, physical education, and art. So students under the academic stream are prepared for university education and graduate with a certificate of secondary education, while students who complete vocational stream receive a certificate of vocational education. So upon graduation for the vocational students, they may now be employed, or they are prepared for employment, and of course they can also pursue further studies. Under the vocational stream program, students specialize in one of the 5 major fields. So, yan, Thailand incorporates craft studies in their education, secondary education. The 5 major fields that where they can specialize from are agriculture, home economics, business studies. Under the business studies, they have marketing, travel and tourism, and public relations. They have arts and crafts and technology. Under the technology, they have mechanical, civil, and electronic industrial. So that is the craft education in Thailand. So we have just discussed crafts, how crafts are incorporated into formal education systems of our neighboring countries, of some East and Southeast Asian countries. The accommodation of crafts courses within the formal education in the Philippines, therefore, has precedent and should not therefore be dismissed. Not unlike our neighbors, the Philippines has a long history of craft production that goes back to pre-Hispanic times. So it is about time that craft education must also be elevated to a new level of reckoning. So at the very least, in the secondary school system, but now in the new curriculum, it is nice, or it is great that they have included this subject for all the field, or for all the courses to take. As for your first journal entry for creative journal, you have to choose among the Asian countries that we have discussed. You can only choose one and create a journal spread highlighting their craft. So you have to do some research, aside from those that we have discussed, and create, of course, creative journal or creative spread, or like scrapbook that highlights the crafts, specific crafts or more than one crafts of that specific Asian countries that they have chosen. So we have here an example. So in this example, the student chose Japan, and he highlighted some of their crafts. So that's it for this week's for this video. I'll be giving you an assessment via Google form. The link will be posted on our Edmodo class, and you have 1 week to take the test or the exam. After 1 week, I will be closing the quiz or the assessment. So that would be all. Thank you so much for listening.